Welcome home to St. Anne's. We want you to know that you're welcome to join us at 10 a.m. on Sundays. Please be sure to hit subscribe to receive our sermons. We can't wait to meet you. I learned my lesson last week, so I'm not starting off with a joke. That didn't work. So welcome, because generally people are like, oh, and this works for clergy too, we were there on Easter, we can take this one off. So God bless you, and God bless me, because we're here. And what's interesting is this is a really, really important gospel. It's actually so important that we read it every year. Now, that's unique because in our lectionary cycle, for those of you who have ever heard other churches be like, oh, we're a Bible-based church, you'd be like, dude, we read the whole Bible in 3 years. Do you? So, because literally, if you're a Christian, you're a Bible-based church, it kind of is the same thing. But anyway, so it usually takes us 3 years. We read the entire Bible in 3 years. And so some really questionable pieces, which we kind of chop out. There's a psalm about bashing kids' heads in with rocks. Because that's one that we need to have more conversations about before we stand up here and read it, and then say, the word of the Lord, because that's awkward. But the good news is we read the entire Bible in 3 years. But there are certain pieces of it that we're like, that's super, super, super important. And so we read it every year. Now, there aren't that many of them. But one of them is this one, on the story of Doubting Thomas, right? Who's ever heard the term Doubting Thomas? You know, you say, well, that's ridiculous. And somebody says, well, you're so... Right? It's a pretty common term. I like to think of Thomas as the patron saint of Missouri. Classic show me. Except, personally, I don't really want to put my hands in anyone's sides. But I do consider Thomas the patron saint of Missouri. And so sermons around Thomas usually go two ways. One, it's a cautionary tale. You know, you need to believe even if you haven't seen it. You know, like that idiot Thomas didn't. So he screwed up. But let it be known, you should have faith, even though you've never seen anything and you're kind of wrestling with it, but don't. Don't. Wrestling with your faith is bad. Who's ever heard that sermon? Don't raise your hand. I don't need to know that, because then I'll just feel sad. Or we go the other way, which is we attempt to redeem Thomas. And we're like, well, Thomas is really us. So it's okay when we're struggling with our doubt, because God shows up in that. And so Thomas is the patron saint of you and me. And usually, I'll be perfectly honest, that's usually where my sermon goes on Doubting Thomas Sunday, because I think it's super, super important that we hear it's okay. It's not just okay, it's mandatory for us to wrestle with our faith. We must doubt to really, truly ever believe. Blind faith is really not faith at all. You might start there as a child, but then we grow through our wrestling and our doubt to be like, And it's really in that we come to true, honest to God faith. Faith is not stupidity. Faith is not blind stupidity. It is the wrestling with it and realizing that in your core, there is more to this than seems evident. Does that make sense? You can say no, because I'm just going to move on anyway. Okay, so the story of Thomas is we usually go in one of those two different directions. Because I think we like to prescribe Christianity. We like to say that there's a right way to do it. Who's ever been in that church who's like, if you, don't tell me if you have, because then I'll just be sad. But if you don't pray this certain way, then you're not a Christian. If you don't believe this certain way, you're not a Christian. Oh, and you're going to hell too, by the way. Surprise! That's going to be fun. How do we know that anyway? Ridiculous. Anyway, Or your faith should look exactly like this, or you're going to hell. Or at least you're not a good Christian, because we have a hard time like really deciphering who's going to hell and who's not. Like, it gets really complicated. Like, even Jesus and the Bible don't always agree on that. So don't worry too much about it, because I promise you, clergy, we don't know. I mean, we might say it as a carrot stick kind of thing, but we don't really know. Go ahead. So just throw that out the window. And so we've all been in those situations where we're like, oh, crap, I'm doing it wrong. I don't have enough faith. If I had enough faith, it would look like this. Or if I had the right spirituality, it would look like this. Or any of those things. We think that we have the wrong religion, maybe. And that's exactly how we end up feeling. Yes. Who has ever felt that way in Christianity? You're like, oh, crap. I'm doing it all wrong. And what if I go to hell? Yikes. Right? We all have those moments. The story of Thomas that I think we really need to hang on to is that religion cannot be prescribed. That our faith and our beliefs are going to be as unique as we are. And in fact, as unique as we are in that exact moment. Because faith, religion, spirituality, they grow and they change just as we grow and change. Who here has the same, don't tell me if this is true, because again, I'll just be sad. But who has the same faith now that they did when they were 3? But I will tell you something. This is why we have an open table. Kids get religion. They get it. They get God. They dance up here to get communion. But is our faith the same now that it was then? No. Are we the same as we are? Oh God, I hope not. I hope I've changed since I was 3. Though arguably, depending if you ask my parents, I'd probably say no. But it changes, right? And it grows. And the beautiful message of Thomas is that God is present in that. That while we as humans might prescribe our religion and say it looks like this and you should be doing it this way and you should believe this in this way, that's not what God says. God shows up. Christ comes to Thomas, where Thomas is, how Thomas is, why Thomas is the way that he is. In the same way that God shows up to the disciples, where are the disciples? They're cowering in a locked room, terrified, because think about what has just happened. Think about that. That is terrifying. Your best friend was slaughtered. You've been threatened. And now his body's gone, and you hear that he's been resurrected, but you're not absolutely certain about that because it was from Mary, and, she's a chick. So, she could be wrong. I mean, they're hormonal. And when they get hormonal, they get weird. She could be wrong. I'm allowed to say that because I'm a woman, and it's sarcastic. Dudes, if you say that, I will find you. So I can say it because I'm sarcastic, and it's okay. So there's all this confusion, but Christ shows up anyway. Christ shows up anyway to them and is with them and in fact sends them, gives them the gift of the Holy Spirit and says, you know what, it's going to be okay. You are equipped to handle this. And when they tell Thomas about it later, Thomas is like, whatever. Because I'm assuming, because this is like 12 dudes hanging out all the time, I'm assuming that they do a lot of pranks on each other. I mean, I'm just saying, my husband was in a fraternity, and I spent way too much time in the fraternity house. Shh, we're not going to talk about that. But 12 dudes together, I'm assuming that they played a lot of pranks on Thomas. And Thomas has a reason to be like, yeah, whatever. Like, dude, until I see it, But Christ comes anyway to Thomas. So the point of all of this is not a prescription. You aren't called to be exactly like Peter. You aren't called to be exactly like Luke. You aren't called to be exactly like Thomas. You're called to be who you are in your faith journey, where you are, how you are, when you're there. So it's not about whether or not you're doubting or whether or not your faith is 110%. It's about the fact that you're there, that you're trying, that you're making an effort, that there are times when you doubt and you wrestle with it and you are like, there is no freaking way that this is true. That's part of a faith journey. And trust me, Christ will show up. So here's the message of Christ to us today. Have faith even in your doubt. Have faith. Believe. But don't believe because somebody told you to. Have faith because Christ will show up.